It started with a request, cloaked in a plea. My Aunt Marin, 56 and perpetually stressed, cornered me in the kitchen one humid June evening. "Eloise," she began, her voice soft, almost a whisper, "your cousin Natasha needs a place to stay. Just for the summer, you know, while she gets back on her feet. I'm Eloise Clark, 29 years old, and my idea of a perfect evening involves a good book and blessed silence. I've been renting a room in Marin's house for 5 years, my quiet sanctuary, my escape from the world. I'm not exactly a social butterfly, and my space is sacred. But Marin, bless her heart, has this way of making family obligation sound like a moral imperative. She's the head of our small, fractured family, and her word usually goes. Natasha, my older cousin, 38, arrived a few days later, all wide smiles and effusive apologies, dragging a couple of oversized suitcases and her 15-year-old daughter, April. April, by contrast, looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, her face buried in her phone, a permanent scowl etched between her eyebrows. Natasha had a sob story ready, a sudden eviction, a bad breakup, needing a safe space for April. She was charming, effortlessly so, the kind of person who could talk you into anything with a flutter of her eyelashes. "Oh, Eloise, you're such a lifesaver," Natasha had gushed, wrapping me in a hug that felt more like a strategic maneuver. "Just until I find a new place. A few months tops. We'll be out of your hair before you know it." Marin beamed, clearly relieved. I, on the other hand, felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. I'm not confrontational. I tend to internalize things, to just get on with it. So, despite the immediate dread, I nodded. A tight, reluctant agreement. My room, with its decent mattress and the window that actually opened, was handed over. I packed a duffel bag with essentials, shoved the rest of my clothes into a corner of the hall closet, and moved my life onto the sagging living room couch. It smelled faintly of stale potpourri and regret. It's temporary, I told myself, trying to believe it. Summer crawled by. The few months tops started stretching. Natasha, with her perfectly coiffed hair and endless supply of excuses, never seemed to find a job that stuck. April, sullen and entitled, spent most of her time glued to her phone, occasionally emerging to make demands or slam a door. My financial burden, meanwhile, had ballooned. When they first moved in, Marin had suggested, "Oh, Eloise, since you're already here and working, perhaps you could cover a bit more of the utilities this month?" Natasha's really struggling. It started with utilities, then groceries, then the internet bill. Natasha would occasionally offer a $20 bill with a flourish, as if she were single-handedly keeping the household afloat, while I was quietly transferring hundreds from my savings. My introverted nature meant I rarely pushed back, but the resentment was a constant, dull ache in my chest. The whole dynamic of the house shifted. Marin, always a bit passive, now deferred to Natasha on everything. Natasha's opinions became household law. My subtle suggestions, maybe April could help with dishes, or could we turn off the lights when we leave a room, were met with dismissive waves or a condescending pat on the arm from Natasha. "Oh, Eloise, you're such a worrier." "Relax a little." April, meanwhile, treated me like an unwelcome guest in my own home, rolling her eyes if I walked past, leaving her shoes squarely in the middle of the hallway. Summer gave way to fall. The leaves turned, then fell. The air grew crisp. Still, they were here. My room, now Natasha's domain, was a constant reminder of my displaced life. I'd wake up with a crick in my neck, listening to the morning news through the thin living room wall, and pretending I wasn't absolutely seething. The temporary situation was now well into its 5th month, then its 6th. It was clear they weren't going anywhere. One chilly evening in late January, nearly 8 months after they'd arrived, I was trying to read on the couch, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, when I heard Natasha on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was barely a whisper, hushed and conspiratorial. I usually tuned out her endless calls, but a specific phrase snagged my attention. She thought I was asleep. Just give it a few more months, she murmured, her voice low and chilling. She doesn't suspect anything. My blood ran cold. She? Me? Suspect what? The phone clicked off, and I heard her footsteps approaching the living room. I quickly closed my eyes, feigning sleep. The conversation replayed in my head, a chilling premonition of something far worse than a temporary inconvenience. This wasn't about getting back on her feet. This was a plan. And I was part of it, whether I knew it or not. 8 months. That's how long it had been since Natasha and April rolled their suitcases into my life and my bedroom. 8 months of the sagging couch, 8 months of my savings slowly draining, 8 months of biting my tongue until it felt raw. It was February now, cold and grey, and the just for the summer promise was a cruel joke that echoed in my head every morning. The tension in the house was a thick, suffocating blanket. Every slammed door, every passive-aggressive comment, every one of Natasha's endless phone calls felt like a personal affront. My patience, never particularly abundant, had worn thin, frayed down to a single, brittle thread. The breaking point came, as these things often do, over something trivial. I was trying to leave for work, already running late, when April, my 15-year-old cousin, sauntered out of my old room, leaving her backpack squarely in the middle of the narrow hallway. I tripped over it, stumbling against the wall, my coffee sloshing precariously. "April, move your bag!" I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. She barely glanced up from her phone, her thumb still scrolling. "Chill, Eloise. It's not like you're going anywhere important." Then, with a dramatic sigh, she kicked the backpack a few inches to the side, not nearly enough to clear the path, and slammed the door to my room shut behind her. The whole house vibrated. That was it. The thread snapped. I took a deep breath, counted to 10, then walked straight into the kitchen, where Natasha, 38, was sipping tea with Maren, 56. They looked up, startled by my sudden, uncharacteristic directness. "Natasha," I said, my voice flat, devoid of its usual passive politeness. "It's been 8 months. April just slammed my door in my face again. This isn't working. I need my room back." Natasha's charming smile vanished, replaced by a look of incredulous offence. "Excuse me? After everything Maren and I have done for you, letting you stay here so cheaply, you're going to be selfish about a room?" "Selfish?" I scoffed, the word tasting like ash. "I'm paying more than half the bills. I'm sleeping on a couch that's giving me scoliosis, and I can't even walk through my own house without tripping over April's mess. This was supposed to be just for the summer." "It's February." Maren, ever the mediator, wrung her hands. "Eloise, honey, they're family. They need us. You know how hard it is out there." "Oh, touchy much?" April's muffled voice floated from behind the closed door of my room. I could hear the smirk in her tone. Natasha's eyes narrowed. "You're being ridiculous, Eloise. We're not going anywhere. April needs stability." She said it with such conviction, as if I was the unstable one. I stared at them, Maren's pleading eyes, Natasha's cold, hard gaze. It was clear. They weren't going to budge. They weren't just staying. They were digging in. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my gut. Fine. If they wanted to play dirty, I could learn. I didn't say another word. I just turned, grabbed my bag, and walked out the front door, leaving the house's oppressive silence behind me. I spent the day at work stewing, the conversation replaying in my head. She doesn't suspect anything. Natasha's whispered words from months ago suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, the house finally quiet, I couldn't sleep. The couch felt harder than usual, the air thicker. I got up, restless. I needed something from my old room, a book, a charger, anything. I told myself it was just an excuse. What I really needed was to reclaim a piece of what was mine. The door to my old room was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, quietly. April's side of the room was a typical teenage disaster zone. Clothes strewn everywhere, but Natasha's side was meticulously neat. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting long shadows. I moved silently, my eyes scanning the familiar space. My old nightstand was still there, but now it held Natasha's collection of lotions and a stack of magazines. As I reached for a book on the shelf above the nightstand, my gaze drifted down. Tucked almost perfectly out of sight, under the lip of the nightstand, I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible red light, blinking steadily. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was too small to be a phone charger, too deliberate to be a random reflection. My fingers trembled as I reached under, feeling for it. It was cold, smooth plastic. I pulled it out. It was a small black cube, no bigger than my thumb. A lens stared back at me. A hidden camera. My breath hitched. I looked around the room, my eyes darting. Where else? I remembered Hector, Marin's 40-year-old boyfriend, a handyman, had been doing some repairs in the house a few months back, including the vents. He was always a bit too flirty, too hands-on. I moved to the wall near the ceiling. The vent cover seemed slightly off. I pulled a chair over, stood on it, and carefully pried open the vent. Inside, nestled among the dusty fins, were 3 more of those tiny black cubes, all perfectly angled. One pointed directly at the bed, another toward the door, and a third, disturbingly, towards the small desk where I used to sit and read. My stomach lurched. Not 1, not 2, 4 hidden cameras all pointing into my old bedroom. The room where I had lived for years. The room where I had slept, dressed, existed. The room they had taken from me. The whispered words from Natasha echoed in my mind again, but this time they weren't a premonition. They were a confession. The next morning, the house felt different. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, at least on my end. I'd barely slept. The image of those tiny lenses burned into my mind. 4 cameras in my old room. The sheer audacity of it left me numb, then incandescent with rage. I waited until dinner. It was Tuesday, Marin's night to cook, which meant everyone would be at the table. Marin, 56, was bustling around, setting out plates. Natasha, 38, was scrolling on her phone, occasionally barking an order at April, 15, who was, predictably, glued to her own screen. Hector, Marin's 40-year-old boyfriend, was already there, nursing a beer, his eyes lingering on me a moment too long as I walked in. He was always a bit too friendly, a bit too close for comfort. My skin crawled. I sat down, my hands clasped tightly under the table. My heart was a drum in my chest, but my face felt frozen. I needed to be calm. I needed to be clear. So, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. I found something interesting last night. Natasha looked up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. Oh, Eloise, not another complaint about April's backpack, please. We're eating. No, I said, pulling the tiny black cube from my pocket and placing it squarely in the middle of the table, next to the mashed potatoes. It looked so innocuous, so small, yet it held such a monstrous secret. This. Marin leaned forward, squinting. What is that, dear? A new USB stick? April snickered. Did you finally get a life, Eloise? Is that a spy cam for your cat? Natasha's eyes, however, had gone cold. Her charming facade cracked, just for a second, revealing something hard and calculating underneath. She recovered quickly, though. Eloise, what on earth are you talking about? This, I repeated, picking it up, is a hidden camera. And it was tucked under the nightstand in my old room. Your room now. I looked directly at Natasha, and there were 3 more in the vent. A beat of silence. Then, a ripple of movement. Marin's eyes widened, but before she could speak, Natasha let out a short, sharp laugh. Oh, Eloise, she said, shaking her head, a patronizing smile spreading across her face. You've been watching too many thrillers, sweetheart. What, are you paranoid now? That's just a little security camera I bought for April's safety. There are so many weirdos out there, you know. She waved a dismissive hand. April, who had been watching the exchange with keen interest, suddenly burst out laughing. A loud, cackling sound that grated on my nerves. She slapped Natasha's arm. Good one, Mom. Eloise thinks we're spies. Natasha high-fived April across the table. It was a practice move, a synchronized performance. Marin, meanwhile, had regained her composure. She sighed, rolling her eyes in my direction. Eloise, honestly, it's a misunderstanding. Natasha is just trying to protect April. You know how worried she gets. She gave me a look that said, "Don't make a fuss." Hector, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "Well, if you need any help with security, Eloise, I'm your man. I know a thing or two about cameras." He winked. The implication, the casual dismissal, the way they were all ganging up on me, it was like a punch to the gut. I looked at their faces, Natasha's feigned innocence, April's cruel amusement, Marin's weary exasperation, Hector's leering suggestion. They weren't shocked. They weren't concerned. They were amused. They were laughing at me. Something inside me snapped, not in a loud, explosive way, but quietly, definitively. The anger, the hurt, the humiliation. It solidified into a cold, hard core of resolve. I felt my face go blank, my emotions receding behind an impenetrable wall. They wanted to play dumb? Fine. They wanted to laugh? They wouldn't be laughing for long. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply picked up the tiny camera, pocketed it, and stood up from the table. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, my voice flat, almost robotic. I walked away, leaving them to their snickering. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. They thought I was crazy. They thought I was stupid. They thought they could get away with it. I pulled out my phone. The first thing I did was order a nanny cam online. Not a hidden one, but a visible, legitimate one. I needed a decoy, something to make them think I was just being paranoid, watching them. But that wasn't the real plan. The real plan was to watch them watching me, or rather watching them watching my old room. The next morning, before anyone else was awake, I set up the new nanny cam in the living room, pointed squarely at the entrance to the hallway. It was obvious, blinking a clear blue light. If they thought I was paranoid, I'd give them something to be paranoid about. Then I started documenting. Every strange noise, every odd conversation, every time someone entered or left the house. I started a new note on my phone, meticulously logging dates and times. I also started noting when specific people were home alone in the room. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but I knew it was there, and I was going to find it. I called my best friend, Riley Hopkins, 28, later that day. Riley was the only person I trusted implicitly, my rock. She listened patiently, without interruption, as I recounted the whole humiliating dinner scene. "Eloise," she said, her voice tight with suppressed fury, That's beyond messed up." "Are you okay?" "I'm not okay, Riley," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "But I'm going to be. They think I'm a joke. They think I'm weak." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her tone shifting from concern to quiet determination. She knew me. She knew this wasn't just about getting my room back anymore. "I'm going to find out what they're doing," I told her, my voice hardening. "And then I'm going to make them regret every single laugh." Riley was silent for a moment. "Okay," she finally said. "Tell me what you need. I'm in." That night I started a new folder on my laptop, encrypted and hidden. I named it Project Karma. The first entry was a time-stamped note. Nanny cam installed. Decoy in place. The real surveillance begins now. Project Karma became my new obsession. The visible nanny cam in the living room, blinking its little blue light, was a brilliant distraction. Natasha, 38, and April, 15, would occasionally glance at it, a flicker of suspicion in their eyes, but mostly they seemed to dismiss it as my latest neurotic quirk. Marin, 56, just sighed whenever she saw it, probably thinking I was losing my mind. Hector, 40, Marin's boyfriend, seemed to enjoy making exaggerated gestures in front of it, flexing his biceps or winking. They all thought they were so clever, so untouchable. But while they were distracted by the decoy, I was working. My hidden folder on the laptop grew daily. I started noticing patterns. Natasha would receive these nondescript brown packages, always delivered when Maren was out. She'd take them directly into my old room, sometimes staying in there for hours, the door locked. When she emerged, she'd be flushed, agitated, and the packages would be gone. Another oddity, Maren. She had her own bedroom, of course, but lately she'd been spending more and more nights on the pull-out sofa in the den, claiming she had trouble sleeping. It was a flimsy excuse. I'd seen her glance at Natasha's door with a strange, almost fearful expression. It was subtle, but I was looking for subtlety now. One afternoon, I came home early from work. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I heard faint whispers from my old room. I crept closer, pressing my ear to the door. It was April. She was talking to someone, her voice low and urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but then I heard a distinct, tinny sound, the audio of a video playing, and then a name. C. Blackmail. My heart hammered. I moved away from the door just as it opened. April stepped out, her face pale, her eyes wide. She clutched a small, sleek iPad to her chest, her thumb hovering over the screen. She saw me. Her eyes darted from me to the iPad, then back again. "What are you doing?" she snapped, trying to sound casual, but her voice was shaky. "Just getting a glass of water," I said, my voice calm, belying the storm inside me. "What are you doing?" "Nothing," she practically shrieked, clutching the iPad tighter. "Just watching TikToks?" She shoved the iPad under her arm and practically ran down the hall. I watched her go, the name C. Blackmail echoing in my head. TikToks didn't usually involve hushed whispers and terrified expressions. Later that week, I was in the kitchen when Emma Ward, Natasha's younger sister, 34, came over. Emma was usually quiet, trying to stay out of the family drama. She was more like me, reserved. She'd been avoiding me since Natasha and April moved in, probably sensing the tension, but today she looked troubled. She poured herself a glass of water, then turned to me, her voice low. "Hey, Eloise, can I ask you something? Weird?" I raised an eyebrow. "Go for it." "Did you ever find anything weird in the vent in your old room?" she asked, her eyes flicking towards the hallway. My blood ran cold. This was it. Someone else knew. "Weird how?" I pressed, trying to keep my voice neutral. Emma's shoulders sagged. She looked genuinely conflicted. "Just, like, anything out of place. Natasha sometimes gets these ideas." She trailed off, her gaze darting to the living room, as if afraid Maren or Natasha would appear. "Emma," I said, stepping closer, my voice firm. "What do you know?" She chewed on her lip, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and guilt. "Look, I shouldn't have said anything. Just be careful, okay? Natasha can be resourceful." She backed away, clearly regretting her words, and quickly changed the subject to the weather. I didn't push her, but her words confirmed my suspicions. She knew. Or at least, she suspected something similar. The final piece of the puzzle arrived a few days later, tucked into the stack of mail Maren usually left on the kitchen counter. It was a plain white envelope, addressed to Eloise Clark. I opened it, expecting a bill. Instead, it was an invoice for a video security setup, a professional-grade multi-camera system, complete with installation fees. The total was astronomical, and the date on the invoice was from last summer, shortly after Natasha and April moved in. I had never ordered anything like this. My hands trembled as I looked at the company name, Stealthy Surveillance Solutions. Underneath, a website address, intimateexpose.com. I felt a cold dread spread through me. This wasn't just about hidden cameras in my room. This was something far more sinister. I took a picture of the invoice, then carefully tucked it back into the mail pile, making sure it looked untouched. That night, I typed intimateexpose.com into my browser. The page loaded slowly, revealing a dark, minimalist design. It wasn't what I expected. No flashy banners, no obvious porn, just a login screen and a few cryptic categories. My heart pounded. This was it. This was the rabbit hole. The name intimateexposed.com had burrowed into my brain, a venomous little parasite. I waited until Maren, 56, and Natasha, 38, were out running errands, and April, 15, was at school. The house was finally quiet. I called Riley, 28, my best friend, and told her to come over. This wasn't something I could face alone. When Riley arrived, I showed her the invoice first. Her eyes widened. Stealthy surveillance solutions? What in the actual hell, Eloise? Then I pulled up the website, intimateexposed.com. The login screen stared back at us. I tried some obvious passwords. Nothing, I explained, my voice tight. But look at the categories. I scrolled down. Couples caught, private moments, unsuspecting subjects. This isn't just some security company. This is something else. Riley's jaw tightened. This looks like a voyeur site, or worse, a blackmail site. We spent the next hour doing a deep dive. We searched for any public information about stealthy surveillance solutions. Nothing. It was a ghost company. Then we went back to intimateexposed.com. We tried every combination of keywords we could think of, looking for anything that might link it to our address, to Natasha, to April. Then Riley gasped. Eloise, look! She pointed at a small, blurry thumbnail image on a forum section of the site, labelled New Uploads. It was a still frame from a video, taken from a high angle. It was April's room. My old room. The same messy desk, the same posters on the wall. The profile picture used by the uploader was a cartoon avatar, but the metadata, Riley, with her tech-savvy skills, managed to pull up some of it. It showed an IP address that traced back to our general neighbourhood and a timestamp from last fall. Someone has been selling access to live and recorded footage, I whispered, my voice hoarse, under my name, with metadata from my house. The invoice, the cameras, it all clicked into place with a sickening thud. Natasha wasn't just living here. She was running a business out of my stolen bedroom, using my identity. Okay, we need to figure out who installed these, Riley said, her face grim. You mentioned Hector, Maren's boyfriend, was doing work on the vents? Hector Jones, 40, Maren's handyman boyfriend, had always given me the creeps. He was always around, fixing things, always with a leering comment or a lingering touch. I remembered him working on the vents in the hallway, and then, after Natasha and April moved in, he'd spent an unusual amount of time in my old room, claiming to be fixing a draft. I'll call Juan, I said, picking up my phone. Juan Taylor, 32, was our landlord. He was a decent guy, a semi-friend, and he knew Hector because Hector sometimes did odd jobs for him around the other rental properties. Juan answered on the second ring. I kept my voice casual, asking about a hypothetical leak, then steered the conversation. Hey, speaking of repairs, you know Hector, right? Maren's boyfriend. He did some work on our vents a while back. Did he ever do any specialised installations for you? Juan paused. Hector? Yeah, he's handy. He's done some vent work for me, mostly standard stuff. But he did mention Natasha asking him about some discreet cabling for a home security system a few months ago. Said she wanted it really hidden. I thought it was a bit odd, but he's a professional. He said it was for her peace of mind with April. My blood ran cold. Discreet cabling. Really hidden. Hector had installed them, on Natasha's request. Just as I hung up with one, Emma, Natasha's younger sister, 34, called me. She sounded frantic. Eloise, I need to talk to you. I can't keep this to myself anymore. I told her to come over immediately. When she arrived, she was pale, wringing her hands. I heard Natasha on the phone, she blurted out, her voice trembling. She was talking about new content and subscribers, and she mentioned you and your old room. Emma, what exactly do you know? I demanded, my patience gone. She took a shaky breath. Natasha. She's been filming people, couples who stay over, anyone really. She's been selling the footage online, under fake usernames. She told me she needed money, but This is sick. She even talked about getting April to help with the uploads for a cut. My stomach churned. Filming who? Emma looked away, her voice barely a whisper. Anyone. Friends, acquaintances, anyone who spent time in that room. She said it was easy money. Your private life. It was all exploited. She said she even got some good footage of your ex when he stayed over a few months ago. The air left my lungs. My ex. Months ago. The time when I was still trying to make things work, when I was vulnerable, when I thought my privacy was absolute. The thought of my most intimate moments, captured and sold, made me feel violated, dirty. I logged back onto intimateexposed.com, my fingers shaking. I searched the categories, filtering by date, and then I saw it. A video thumbnail, uploaded months ago, titled, Teacher's Pet Caught on Camera. The blurry image was unmistakable. It was me, and my ex, in my old bedroom. The screens swam before my eyes. They hadn't just stolen my room. They had stolen my dignity, my privacy, my very self. And they had laughed about it. The cold resolve I'd felt before hardened into something sharper, more dangerous. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming everything they had taken. The video, Teacher's Pet Caught on Camera, played on a loop in my mind. It was a violation so profound, so utterly dehumanizing, that it stripped away any lingering reluctance I had. Natasha, 38, had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. And April, 15, was complicit. I spent the next few days in a haze of cold fury, meticulously gathering my evidence. The invoice from Stealthy Surveillance Solutions. The screenshots from intimateexposed.com, including the one with the metadata pointing to our house. The logs from my own nanny cam, showing Natasha's suspicious comings and goings, and the times she was alone in my old room. Emma, 34, had provided a detailed, tearful confession, even writing down some of the usernames Natasha used and the dates she'd seen her upload. Riley, 28, my best friend, had helped me organise it all, her face a mask of grim determination. The time for subtlety was over. It was time for the confrontation. I waited until Marin, 56, was out, and April was at school. Just Natasha and me. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. I found Natasha in the living room, scrolling through her phone, looking perfectly serene. She glanced up, a faint, condescending smile on her lips. "Oh, Eloise, still moping about your room? You know, you really should try to be more grateful." I walked over to the coffee table and placed a small, clear plastic bag on it. Inside was one of the tiny black camera cubes I'd found. Next to it, I placed the invoice. Natasha's smile faltered. Her eyes darted from the camera to the invoice, then back to my face. "What is this?" she asked, her voice losing some of its usual charm. "This," I said, my voice low and steady, "is the camera I found in my old room, and this is the invoice for the Stealthy Surveillance Solutions system that was installed there. Funny? Because I never ordered it." Her eyes narrowed. "Eloise, I told you, that's just a security camera. You're being paranoid." She tried to sound dismissive, but her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her phone. "Don't bother calling Marin," I cut her off. "She's not here. And this isn't about Marin. This is about you and April." I leaned forward, my gaze locking onto hers. "I know about intimateexposed.com, Natasha. I know you've been filming people in that room. I know you've been selling the footage. I know you've been using my name, my address, my life to do it. And I know April is involved." Her face went white. The charming mask shattered completely, revealing pure, unadulterated fear and fury. "You have no proof," she hissed, her voice rising. "You're delusional. You think anyone would believe you. You're just a bitter, jealous spinster who can't get her own life together." "Oh, I have proof," I said, a chilling calm in my voice. "I have the invoice. I have screenshots. I have the metadata. I have Emma's testimony, by the way. She told me everything." Natasha flinched, her eyes widening in disbelief. Emma, that little snake. And I have a proposition for you, I continued, ignoring her outburst. You have two choices. You confess everything. To Marin, to the police, to child services about April's involvement. You admit what you've done, you take responsibility, and you get out of this house. For good. Or, I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. I bring it all to the police myself, and I guarantee you they'll find a lot more than just a few hidden cameras. They'll find the entire operation, and they'll find out exactly who was profiting from it. She stared at me, her chest heaving. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, a way out. You can't prove it was me, she stammered, desperation creeping into her voice. You have no proof it wasn't you. You're the one who found the cameras, after all. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. This was the moment. My ace. Oh, I have proof, Natasha. Real proof. The kind that leaves no doubt. I pulled out my phone and showed her a time-stamped video from my own nanny cam. It was blurry, taken from a distance, but clear enough. It showed Natasha, a few weeks ago, furtively reaching behind the toilet tank in the bathroom, pulling out something small, and then discarding it into the trash. That, I said, pointing to the screen, is you, discarding a micro SD card behind the toilet tank. A card, I might add, that I retrieved. And it's full of footage from my old bedroom. Footage that, I'm sure, will have your fingerprints all over it. Her jaw dropped. Her eyes were wide, glazed with terror. She had no idea I had been watching her. The colour drained from her face, leaving her ashen. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked like a cornered animal, all her charm and manipulation stripped away, leaving only raw, ugly fear. She let out a strangled gasp, then scrambled to her feet. You bitch, she spat, her voice laced with pure hatred. She lunged for the camera cube on the table, as if she could destroy the evidence. But I was faster. I snatched it away. Too late, Natasha. It's all documented, every single thing. She stood there, trembling, her eyes darting around the room, from me to the door. She knew she was caught. There was nowhere left to run. With a guttural cry of frustration and rage, she spun on her heel and stormed out of the living room, disappearing into my old bedroom, slamming the door behind her with a force that rattled the entire house. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, I reached for the light switch on the wall. I flicked it off. And in the sudden darkness, from behind the closed door of my old bedroom, every single hidden camera, the ones I had found in the vents and under the nightstand, blinked off at once, a tiny, synchronous, final confirmation of their presence, and now, their defeat. The silence after Natasha stormed off was deafening, yet strangely peaceful. The blinking off of the cameras was my signal. The game was over. Now, for the fallout. I didn't hesitate. I immediately called one Taylor, 32, our landlord. He answered, his voice a little wary. "Eloise, everything okay?" "Not exactly, Juan," I said, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "I need to talk to you. In person. Now. It's about the cameras Hector installed, and the discreet cabling Natasha asked for. He was at the house within 20 minutes. I laid everything out for him. The hidden cameras, the invoice, the website, Emma's confession, and the video of Natasha discarding the SD card. I showed him the teacher's pet video. His face, usually so easygoing, grew increasingly pale, then flushed with anger. This is a nightmare, Eloise," he said, running a hand through his hair. "This is illegal. This is a massive invasion of privacy. And Hector, I can't believe he was involved." "He was," I confirmed. Natasha paid him to install them. He knew exactly what he was doing. Juan was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at me, his eyes serious. "Eloise, this isn't just about getting your room back. This is criminal. This needs to go to the police. And I think you need a lawyer. I know a good one who specializes in privacy cases. I'll go with you. I'll back you up." I nodded. "That's what I want. I'm not asking for apologies. I want justice. I gave him my consent to take all the evidence to his lawyer and to alert the police. I wanted to be out of the direct line of fire, to let the system handle it, but I needed to be sure it would be handled. The next few days were a blur of hushed conversations, legal jargon, and the chilling presence of officialdom. The police arrived, quiet and efficient. They had a warrant. They went straight to me old room, now Natasha's. They found the remaining cameras, exactly where I said they would be. They collected the SD card I had retrieved. April, 15, was home from school when they arrived. She looked terrified, her usual sullenness replaced by wide-eyed panic. When the officers started asking questions, she tried to clam up, but the pressure was immense. Child Protective Services were called, given her age and the nature of the alleged crimes. Faced with the reality of her mother's actions and her own potential involvement, April cracked. She turned against Natasha, spilling everything she knew about the uploads and the website, desperate for leniency. She confirmed Natasha's involvement, Hector's installation, and even some of the names of the people whose footage had been sold. It was a calculated move on her part, a desperate attempt to save herself, and it worked. She was removed from the household by child services, placed with a distant relative, pending further investigation. Natasha Ward, 38, was arrested. The charges were serious: invasion of privacy, illicit filming, distribution of illegal content, and potential blackmail. Her charming facade was completely gone, replaced by a snarling, desperate woman who screamed about being framed. Hector Jones, 40, Marin's boyfriend, was also indicted. One's testimony, combined with the evidence from the cameras and April's statement, was damning. Marin, 56, was a wreck. When she heard about Natasha's arrest and April's removal, she broke down. She came to me, tears streaming down her face, begging, "Eloise, please, don't press charges. She's family. Think about what this will do to her." "To us." I looked at her, my aunt who had guilt-tripped me into giving up my room, who had dismissed my concerns, who had laughed when I presented the evidence. "Marin," I said, my voice flat. "She filmed me. She sold my private moments. She stole my life for 8 months. She didn't think about what that would do to me. This isn't about family anymore. This is about justice." She crumpled, sobbing. But I felt nothing. No triumph, no pity, just a cold, quiet satisfaction. A few days later, the house was quiet again. The police had finished their work. Natasha and April were gone. Hector was gone. The air felt lighter, cleaner. Marin was still there, but she moved like a ghost, her spirit broken. I walked into my bedroom, my actual bedroom. It was clean, empty, stripped of Natasha's belongings. The mattress felt firm beneath my hand. The window, which actually opened, let in a cool, fresh breeze. It was quiet, so quiet. My name was finally cleared. The whispers, the snickers, the condescension, they were gone. I was no longer the paranoid, bitter Eloise. I was the one who had exposed the truth. I sat on the edge of my bed, the weight of the past 8 months settling on me. It was over. Almost. I reached for the nightstand drawer, the one I had locked before Natasha moved in. I pulled it open. Inside, nestled amongst some old letters, was the final SD card, the one I had found behind the toilet tank, the one with Natasha's fingerprints, the one that held all the raw, unedited footage. I hadn't given it to the police yet. Not everything. Not quite. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the loudest sound in the house now. Days bled into weeks after Natasha's arrest and April's removal. Marin, 56, moved through the house like a ghost, her face etched with grief and shame. She barely spoke, mostly kept to her own room, the one she'd avoided for so long. The family unit, already fractured, had shattered completely. Emma, 34, Natasha's younger sister, came to visit me a couple of times. She looked relieved, but also deeply shaken. "I'm moving," she told me one afternoon, her voice quiet. "Far away. I can't be around this anymore. I need a fresh start." I understood. She'd been caught in the crossfire. a reluctant accessory to her sister's depravity. I wished her well. Riley, 28, my best friend, was the only one who didn't treat me like a fragile porcelain doll. She came over with takeout and a bottle of wine, and we sat on my actual bed, the one that no longer smelled of stale potpourri and regret. "You did good, Eloise," she said, clinking her glass against mine. "You stood up for yourself. You got justice." I took a sip of wine. Did I? The satisfaction I'd felt initially had faded, replaced by a strange emptiness. It wasn't triumph. It was closure, maybe, but at a cost. Natasha was facing serious time, Hector was indicted, April was in the system, and Marin was a shell of her former self. My family, what was left of it, was irrevocably broken. "You exposed them," Riley insisted. "You stopped it. Think about all the other people she was exploiting." She had a point. The investigation into intimateexposed.com was widening. The police, with one's help, were tracing IP addresses and subscriber lists. Turns out, Natasha wasn't just filming random people. Some of the buyers of the footage were prominent figures, people in positions of power, who had paid good money for illicit peeks into private lives. The FBI had gotten involved. It was a massive, sprawling mess, and Natasha was at the centre of it. The karma, it seemed, was far-reaching. I still had the final SD card, the one I'd found behind the toilet tank, the one with Natasha's fingerprints, the one with all the raw, unedited footage. I hadn't given it to the police. Not yet. It was my insurance, my ultimate leverage if I ever needed it. But for now, it remained locked in my nightstand drawer. People had suggested I write a book, sell my story, go on TV, monetize the trauma. But the thought made my skin crawl. I wasn't a hero. I was just a woman who had been pushed too far, who had fought back. The idea of profiting from the ugliness of it all felt wrong. But I did need to tell someone. Not for money, not for fame, but for catharsis. So late one night, sitting at my desk in my own quiet room, I opened a throwaway account on Reddit. I started typing, pouring out the whole twisted story, from the couch to the cameras, from the whispers to the arrests. It felt like shedding a heavy skin, each word a release. I didn't use real names, just enough detail for people to understand the horror of it. I hit post, and then closed the laptop. My mother, long gone, used to say, "They say blood is thicker than water, Eloise. But sometimes, it's just a mess." She was right. Blood had proven to be a messy, toxic thing in my life. But I'd found something else, something stronger. The silence in my room was no longer oppressive. It was a sanctuary, a hard-won peace. It was power. Just as I was about to drift off, my phone buzzed. A notification, an unfamiliar name, an unknown number. I hesitated, then tapped it open. One line. "You're not the only one they filmed.